Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be showing you guys 3 different methods that I use to trigger animations in my virtual production using Unreal Engine and Aximmetry DE. Adding animations to your virtual production can add overall value. It'll make things look more dynamic, and it will mean happier clients, and happier client means that you can charge more. Let's get to it. Here you can see a virtual set that I've made for a fake client, and if I press a trigger, I will start animating some screens on my virtual set. And even though these animations are very similar and look the same, and the goal here is the same, they are using very different methods. I'm going to switch to my Aximmetry view here, and as you can see on my dashboard here, I have sort of these triggers and toggles here, and if I press it, it will animate out my screens. All right, so before I get into it, I just want to reply to a comment real quick because it really relates to this topic, and that is a comment from Mind Video Studio. How could you make the virtual screen movable on an OSC button push? All right, so in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to set up the animation and triggering it, and then you can practically assign it to any kind of hardware shortcuts that you want. So going back to Aximmetry, here I have my 3 triggers for my monitors, and I can right click on any of these, and as you can see, it says assign OSC, MIDI, DMX, GPIO, game, and keyboard. So you can hook these triggers to anything that you want. So a few examples of the hardware we like to use, for example, is all the Stream Deck series, Stream Deck, Stream Deck XL, Stream Deck Plus. We use all of these, and we use it with the by itself directly with Aximmetry, or we use the BitFocus companion. So I think that's considered OSC as well, right? So we love using the Stream Decks. It works great. And a lot of times we also like to use a MIDI controller. We love MIDI controllers because they're like super cheap, really affordable. And you can just like stick stickers on it and all that and doodle on it when you have a lot of triggers, as opposed to like one tiny Stream Deck. These are really big, and you have the knobs as well. Those really help sometimes when you want to dim lights and so on. But just FYI, we've had issues with some MIDI drivers. So if you're using a MIDI controller and you find that Aximmetry is crashing a lot of times, you might want to check your MIDI controller driver. It could sometimes cause issues, but not all the time. And another one that you could use is an Xbox controller. Why not, right? If you have one lying around, use it as a controller. Now, the one thing that I don't recommend using is your keyboard, like the actual keyboard that you're using. I really do not recommend assigning any shortcuts to this, because many times we've done that in the beginning when using Aximmetry for virtual production, and a lot of accidents can happen. And you might want to, type in a number when you want to change a value of one of your parameters, and you accidentally trigger something you're not supposed to, and it could cause a mess. So please don't do it unless it's when you're just like testing out. But during production, live day, do not assign shortcuts to your keyboard. If you do, a unicorn will die somewhere. All right, let's jump into the Unreal Editor for Aximmetry. And by the way, if you want to make a virtual set such as this one, you can watch my previous tutorial on how to build your own set. I practically built this set only using like hexagon shapes only. And in future videos, I'm going to be showing you guys how to add details like these neon lights and adding stickers and decals. All right, so for method number 1, and this is the one I use the most because for me, it is the one that is easiest to make complex animations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and make a new folder. I'm going to name it Sequence. And we're going to open it up and add a new cinematic level sequence. And I'm going to name it Monitor A. All right, and I'm going to open up the sequence. Once your sequencer is open, select your Monitor A. This is the one we're going to be using for method 1. I'm going to drag it into the sequencer. There you go. And I'm going to make sure the FPS is the same as my project. So I'm going to be using 30 FPS. That's fine. And as you can see now, I have a reference to the monitor, and we want to be able to animate this monitor. So we will need a transform track. And I want to make this a very simple animation, and we're just going to animate the location for it. and it's going to be the Z location. And this is actually where I want it to end at, right? This is where it's going to stop. So I'm going to make it like maybe like 30 frames, and it's going to stop right here. And I'm just going to keyframe the Z axis here, and I'm going to take it back, and I'm going to pull it like really high up. Let's maybe just type in like 600 and just check if I can see it or not. No, I can't see it right now. So if I press play, now it will animate in. And now there are a few things that you need to make sure. First, you got to make sure that you can like right click here and check the properties. And when finished, you want to set this to keep state, right? Otherwise, when you press a trigger, your monitor animates in, and then it will go back to its original position. You don't want that. You want it to stay where it's supposed to be. So you got to make sure that it is on keep state. And now, the second thing that you need to make sure is here you have the green and red markers. This is the in and out. So obviously you want to have your in marker where the animation starts, and your out marker, you don't want it all the way out here. And here's why. I want to be able to animate this monitor in and also out, right? So what we're going to do is I'm not going to build like a second timeline with it animating out. I'm just going to reverse it. So when I press a button, it's going to go animate in, and it's going to keep the state, right? It's going to keep the state. And then when I press the button again, it's going to animate in reverse, and it's going to animate out. So if I have my out marker here and I play the animation in, it's actually going to keep playing all the way till the marker out. And during this time, it will be like complicated. Like if you try to reverse it and things like that, you just don't want anything to like go wrong. So you want to make sure like the end here, the end marker is exactly where your monitor is stopping, or your animation is stopping. So maybe I can add 1 frame. That's still okay. There you go. So we're actually done with the animation part. I'm just going to save this sequence, and I'm going to drag this sequence into the level because it needs to be in the level so that we can reference to it in the level blueprint. And you can't see the icon here because I got the G button pressed on it. So I'm just going to put it right here in front of the stage. There you go, just to make sure it's there. And now I'm going to open up my level blueprint. So now that I have my level blueprint open, I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to call it monitor AIO for in out. And I'm going to make this a level sequence actor object reference. There you go. And I'm going to compile it. And then I'm going to select the sequence of monitor A, which is in our level. That's why you got to make sure it's in the level. Otherwise, it won't show up here. So it's selected. I'm going to compile it again. So now I can actually drag it in here and get monitor A. So now I want to be able to play this animation, right? So that means we're going to play sequence player, right? There you go. And I want to be able to play this in reverse as well to get the monitor going out. So play reverse. There you go. Play reverse. So now I have the ins and out. This is in and this is out. So now I need a Aximmetry trigger. So get Aximmetry trigger. There you go. I'm just going to close this up so you can see things more clearly. And I'm going to name the trigger monitor AIO and out. There you go. And then I'm going to bind this. Bind event to trigger and event begin play. So when the level is loaded, the virtual set is loaded, it's going to create this trigger and it's going to bind it into an event. It's going to be used to trigger an event, and then it's just a custom event. You can give it a name if you want, but I'm just going to leave it as is. And now you're going to need a flip-flop. So if, right, it is out of frame, or let's say it's in the beginning of the animation, then it will trigger A. But if the animation has ended and you want to reverse it, it will trigger B. So now you have a in and out switch that you can just flip in Aximmetry. So let's compile this and save, and you're actually good to go. Let's try it out in Aximmetry. All right, so now that I've loaded my project in Aximmetry, you can see that I have my little pink pin here. This is to trigger stuff, and it says monitor AIO. So I'm just going to drag the pin to the side here to add it to my dashboard. And now if I press it, my monitor will animate in. And if I press it again, it will animate out. So now I want to talk a little bit about the pros and cons. So the obvious con, the downside to this, is that since everything is done in Unreal, you can't really make any last minute changes in like the position of the monitors and all that. So if you're on the production day, you're going live and the client's like, can you move the screen a little bit to the left or to the right or make it bigger and smaller? Then you have to open up Unreal Engine again and, you know, like adjust your animation and then cook it and then go back to Aximmetry, which is fine if it's like a very light project and you have a strong computer. It won't take that much time anyway. I'm just, you know, putting the point out there that you can't make any like adjustments here within Aximmetry. You have to do it all in Unreal Engine. For me, it's fine, which is why I like using this method, because it's very rare that we have to make any changes on the day. Usually everything has already been approved and already been previewed by the client. Now on the plus side, I really like using this method because I love using the sequencer, and you can make really complex animations if you wanted to. Like for now, we just have the screen going down, but if you wanted, you could animate the scale. You know, the screen could be like really small and then it will get bigger, and you could even like play around with the rotation. So it will like, you know, flip around before it goes into position and all that. So you can really make really cool animations using the sequencer. That's what I love about this. All right, so let's move on to method number 2. And we're gonna animate the second screen here. And this is a little bit different than the first method, because the first method, basically we did the animation in Unreal and then we triggered it in Aximmetry. This time, we're going to do the animation in Aximmetry. So we just need to set up the monitor so that it can receive the transformation in Aximmetry. So I'm going to select my monitor B here. And I want to point something out. Because my monitor here is a blueprint, I don't really to make sure that this is a movable object. If I check the default scene root, it's already set to movable. But if you were to say you wanted to animate your, I don't know, something else like a logo, and it was a static mesh like this one, you have to make sure you set the mobility to movable so that you can affect its position in Aximmetry. If you don't set it to movable and it's still in static, it won't be able to move. Just pointing that out in case, you know, you've done all the steps and you're like, hey, why isn't it moving? You got to make sure this is set to movable. But again, because I'm using a blueprint, it's already set to movable. So with the monitor selected, I can go back to my level, and now I can just hold R and click left. Because I've already selected it here on the level, it will create a reference when you hold R and left click. So this is my monitor, and what I want to do is for it to be able to get a transformation, right? So I'm actually going to right click and get Aximmetry transformation, and I'm gonna name it monitor B pos for like position, because we're going to be animating its position. So I'm gonna drag off the monitor and set world transform there, and I'm gonna set it to the default scene root because I want the whole thing to move, not just the item in the blueprint, but the entire blueprint. So this is going to receive from Aximmetry. I'm going to connect the pin. It's going to receive the data from Aximmetry later on. And now I just need to set this to event tick. Now I want to directly talk about the downside of this is that event tick is something that fires up every single frame, right? It's like when you're using the video input. I already made a tutorial on that. It's, you know, checking every frame for a video input to change the material and making it into a video input and so on. So this is the same thing, you know, Unreal, it's going to check every frame to see if this position is moving or not. Now, if you have a powerful computer and all that, you probably won't even notice it. But if you have like a complex set with a lot of video inputs, a lot of light, and you have a lot of these event tick, get transformation, and all that, it might add up. I'm not an expert, but like in game development, as far as I know, you want to avoid having a lot of event ticks. But other than that, we should be good to go. Now let's move on to Aximmetry. All right, so now I am back in Aximmetry, and you can tell I have a new pin here, a green one that says monitor B pause. But there is an issue here. As you can see, my B monitor is actually not where it's supposed to be anymore. And if I switch my camera again to the wide one, as you can see, my monitor is actually reset to 0.000. That's because it's using event tick, remember? And it's getting the position from Aximmetry. So it's resetting to the point of origin, 000, waiting for an input from Aximmetry. So we actually have to reposition our monitor to where it is supposed to be. So to do that, I'm going to be needing a scene component. There you go. Open it up. And I'm going to get this world transform pin into it. And if I select it here, I can actually already like move it around. So I'm going to move it back where it's supposed to be, up here, and it's actually a bit too big. I'm going to rotate it around 180 degrees, and I'm going to move it back just as it's covering the logo. I think it's supposed to be a little bit bigger. All right, so now it is where it is supposed to be. So now what we want to do is play around with additional transformation to it so it can move up and down. So for that, I'm going to need a new node called Translate Y, because I'm going to be moving it on the Y axis up and down, and I'm going to drag the pin into Add Transform. There you go. So I'm going to be moving on the Y axis, and now I want a dash scalar. Okay, plug it into the delta, and this is a minimum and maximum, right? So minimum 0, it's where it's supposed to be, and I'm going to add the maximum to, well, I don't know, let's move it up and see where it's supposed to go. So maybe like 5, that should be enough to bring it out of the frame. So now if it's in point A, it's where it's supposed to be, and point B, it's out frame. So in and out. And now I can just create a copy logical. There it is. Bring it in here and bring it to my dashboard. I'm going to name it monitor BIO. So now I have a on off switch here, and I can go on, off, on, off. It's actually supposed to be the other way around. So I'm going to change it to 5 and 0. So it's correct. Like now it's off, so there's no monitors, and then on there is a monitor. But as you can see, it's sort of just like teleporting right away from point A to point B, and you don't want that. So what you want to do is to smooth it out so that it has actual movement. So right click, insert node, and search for smooth scalar, and you can hold control and drop it in there on the in out. And now as you can see, on, off, you will have movement, and you can actually like add, you know, if you want more delay to it, I'm gonna set it to like 2 to dual delay on, and it will move slower. So now let's talk about the pros and cons. I already mentioned that this is using event tick, so it's adding to performance. But other than that, what I don't like about this method is that for me, I like setting everything up in Unreal Engine and having my dashboard in Aximmetry clean, because this is the dashboard I'm going to be using on production day, on the live events, and so on. So I don't really like having extra nodes to deal with here in my flow. I rather have as little as possible to keep things tidy and not cluttered. But other than that, what is good about this method is that you can make adjustments. So if you're like, you know, during live and the client's like, I need the monitor to be like a little bit bigger, you can do that. You can just select the scene node and just make it a little bit bigger. You want to like move it higher or make it smaller or whatever. You can make these adjustments on the fly. So that's the upside to it. All right, so let's move on to method number 3. And this is the one I use the least, but it is useful in some occasions, because this time we are actually going to do the script inside the BP monitor blueprint. So inside the object. So I'm going to select it and edit BP monitor. It's going to open up the blueprint, And because we are going to do the script within the blueprint, that means that you can copy paste the folder where this monitor is to all your future projects, and the trigger will work in every single one of them. So this is very useful for reusability, because the method 1 and 2, like method 1, you had to do everything inside the level blueprint. So it is tied up to that current level. All right, so let's get started. What we are going to need is a trigger. So get Aximmetry trigger, and I'm going to name this one monitor CIO, in out. And again, I'm going to bind it, bind event to trigger, and I'm going to grab this from event begin play. So event begin play, create dynamic material. This is the script to get our video input for the monitor. So I can just drag off of this. So it's going to create the dynamic material instance, and then it's going to create my trigger. That's fine. And I'm going to create a custom event. I don't really have to name this. Leave it a custom event. It's fine. And now we're going to use something called a multigate. Multigate. So what a multigate is, on the first method, we used a flip-flop. So we'll play sequence, and then once it stops, it'll play the sequence in reverse. This time I'm going to use a multigate, and I'm going to make it a loop. So basically a multigate is, okay, execute this and then execute this. And because it is a loop, and it's going to go back to execute 0 and then execute 1, execute 0, execute 1, it's going to be like a switch. And I'm going to start at 0, because here it's starting, the execution is starting at 0. And from this multigate, I'm going to get something called a timeline. And this is where we are going to do our animation. So I'm going to name this animate up. Okay, animate up. And then I'm going to get a reference to my root, because I want the whole thing to move. So get, and then we are going to add, and there is something called relative location. So we are going to add movement or transformation of the location based on where it currently is right now. It says here delta location, and I'm going to right click and split struct pin, because I only want the Z, since we are only going up and down. So when we press the trigger, it's going to play, and it's going to update the location. And actually I want it to play from start, not play. And we're going to double click the timeline. And right now it is empty, and I'm going to create a new track, and I'm going to add a vector track. I'm only going to use the Z so I can lock the X and Y, and also turn off the eyeball here. And now I can right click on the timeline here and just like add key here to Z, and it's like 0, 0, 0. This is where it's starting. Value 0, 0, 0. It's nothing. It's just empty. It's just where it's beginning. And I'm going to set the length to maybe like 1, just 1 second for it to go up or down, because 5 seconds is way too long. 1 second, like 1 second. And I'm going to add another key here, add key to Z, and I'm going to type in here the time for 1 second, and I'm going to add the value to maybe like 8 or 7. I think 7.5 should be high enough. Okay, and again, I can fit it to my screen. So this timeline is sort of like the sequencer that we use in method 1. It's going to add transformation to the Z from nothing to 7, a value of 7.5. So it's going to add to it. So it's going to push the monitor up. All right, so go back to the event graph, and here I'm going to split the struct pin, and I'm going to drag the Z to the Z. So this is done for it to go up, and now I'm going to copy this, and this is going to be play from start, and I'm going to name this one animate down, because it's going to go the other way around. And this time, because we are going down, we're going to set it to minus 7.5, and make sure you hit enter, just make sure it's correct. And yes, it's going from 0 to minus 7.5. And actually this might not be enough. I'm going to change it to maybe like actually 10. Let's set it to 10 on the animate up as well. So 10 and minus 10, that should be enough. So back to Aximmetry, as you can see now I have another pink pin, and now I have my third trigger. And I could hit it here now. It's going to go up and it's going to go down. And apparently I didn't set it to go high enough. So I can always go back to Unreal and just go back to my blueprint and just like go back on the timeline and change it to like, I don't know, maybe like 15, and the animate down again and make sure it's okay. 15 and minus 15 has to be the same exact number. Compile, and let's try it out now. And yes, that should be high enough depending on the frame of your camera. If I'm working with a frame like so, then it should be high enough. But if it's not, you can always set the number to go higher. And that's it, guys. Those are the 3 methods that I use to set up and trigger animations in my virtual production. Are those the only methods available? Of course not. We're talking about Unreal Engine and Aximmetry here. There are so many different ways to do anything. In fact, if you know a good one, please share it in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. I hope that was useful, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.